So thanks again to the Revolutionary Students Union for having me. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Freedom Road Socialist Organization. I understand that there's a tradition of giving a history presentation and a theory presentation, kind of dividing things up into that framework, so I'm going to do that. First, I'm going to talk about the history of Freedom Road, and I'm just going to focus mostly on more recent stuff. And then I want to talk about the theory of Freedom Road and what that's all about. So first, who we are. Freedom Road Socialist Organization was founded 25 years ago this year, 1985, from the merger of two groups from the new communist movement, which was an anti-revisionist Marxist-Leninist movement that arose in the 70s. Those two groups were the Proletarian Unity League and the Revolutionary Workers Headquarters. A little later, another group called the Organization for Revolutionary Unity joined, and then in 1994, a group called the Socialist Organizing Network joined, which itself was a regroupment from one of the largest groups from the 80s, the League of Revolutionary Struggle. So, our basic strategy, I'll talk about this more in the theory section, is to build a united front against monopoly capitalism. And the core of that united front is a strategic alliance between the multinational working class and the movements of oppressed nationalities. And the strategic alliance and the united front as a whole has to be led by the working class and its party. So based on that, we've done a lot of mass work, and we're an organization that's known for doing heavy mass work based on the mass line. So through the 80s and 90s, most of our work was union organizing. We also did a significant amount of Central American solidarity stuff around El Salvador and Nicaragua, and supporting the movements of the Sandinistas and the FMLN. So we also had a big impact in the student movement, which had been in decline for a while, through a group called the Progressive Student Network. Likewise, we did electoral work around the Harold Washington campaign, Chicago mayoral campaign, and the Jesse Jackson presidential campaign, and both of these in the interest of building the Black liberation movement. So that's a picture of some of the mass work that we did in that period. In 1999, our organization suffered a split. A group of right opportunists left our organization after a 10-year-long two-line struggle. It began in 1989, ran until 1999, and this rightist group was part of a general rightward trend of the international communist movement following the collapse of the Soviet Union. So a lot of groups around the country became demoralized and started saying, well, what happened in the Soviet Union? Well, I guess we need to ditch Marxism-Leninism and try to explore something new. And that was their approach. And they took a social democratic view that they call left-free foundation. The Marxist-Leninists, the communists in Freedom Road, held on to three pillars of Marxism-Leninism that allowed us to weather these changes that were taking place. One was a paper, an internal struggle paper that was written by Comrade Mick Kelly in 1989 called Continuing the Revolution is Not a Dinner Party. And it was about Tiananmen Square. So that was one thing. Two, the Workers' Party of Belgium, we connected with them, who were taking a good approach, and they wrote a paper called The Balance of the Collapse of the Soviet Union that drew the conclusion that revisionism, a turn away from Marxism in words, but reformism in deeds, or an idea of revising the basic principles of Marxism, had infected the Soviet Union following 1956, and then the Soviet Union degenerated for a period of 30 plus years after that, collapsed in 1991. The third pillar was the Communist Party of the Philippines wrote a paper called Reaffirm Our Basic Principles and Carry the Revolution Forward. So, right after this happened, they were clear and said, look, whatever you think, the collapse of the Soviet Union isn't a failure of Marxism-Leninism. It just shows that revisionism doesn't work. What collapsed in the Soviet Union was the slow restoration of capitalism following the institution of revisionism by Khrushchev. So they were clear, and it helped rally others. So then, based around that, and then the Workers' Party of Belgium wrote or put together a seminar to sum up the collapse of the Soviet Union that meets annually now, called the International Communist Seminar. And in 1999, the seminar adopted a resolution called the 1999 Declaration that kind of goes into summing up the whole history of the International Communist Seminar, or the International Communist Movement. And this became a basis for rectification and reaffirming Marxism-Leninism in our organization, and it was a big part of what kept us on the right path. So, like I said, we're a group known for doing serious mass organizing based on the mass line, and I'll talk more about the mass line and what that means when I talk about theory. But it should be said that in all our mass work, we have three strategic objectives. One, we want to win all that can be won for the people and harm the enemy. Two, we want to raise the level of consciousness, organization, and struggle of the mass organizations that we work in. And three, we want to win the advanced fighters to Marxism-Leninism and build organization for revolution. So our view is that mass work has to accomplish all three of those things simultaneously for it to be revolutionary and valuable to us. So what do we do these days? We work in trade unions. We have concentrations in AFSCME, SEIU, UE, United Electric, and the Teamsters. We base that on a theory of class struggle unionism, which I'll talk about later.
Sorry.
That's quite a wonderful this is a base.
Yeah, I rated the student lounge thing, whatever that was.
Okay, so additionally, we do urban poor organizing. That is, we do welfare rights organizing in low-income communities, and we work to stop housing foreclosures. So, for example, we helped lead a struggle of a woman named Rosemary Williams, whose house was being foreclosed, and we organized support for that, and then we helped her reoccupy her house when she got evicted. Additionally, we do oppressed nationality movement stuff, Black liberation movement, immigrant rights struggles, and the Chicano movement. We have a deep connection to the Chicano and Black liberation struggle that I'll talk about later. And right now we see the immigrant rights struggle as a very significant upsurge that needs support and to be developed. And we do a lot of work in the immigrant rights movement. So additionally, anti-war, anti-intervention organizing, particularly Palestine, Colombia, the Philippines, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and RNC 2008 protests. In Minneapolis, we played a big leading role in that. So also, finally, the student movement, which I work in. We work in Students for a Democratic Society, which was reformed in 2006, and we're developing work in MECHA, the Chicano student movement. Recently, in October, we formed a national coalition to deal with the economic crisis called the Network to Fight for Economic Justice, which brings together a lot of these unions and poor people's movements and stuff like that together. Finally, new growth. Since the 1990s, our organization was in decline, as were most Marxist organizations. In 1999, when the Left Foundationists split, we lost about half of our members. And then, the next 6 years, we were stable with some slow growth. In the past few years, we've seen a big increase in growth, particularly among students, but also amongst the working class.